In this video, we will be covering the second half of the Heisei-era Godzilla movies and covering how strong is this version of Godzilla. Before we continue, there's a little thing I need to clear up first that I forgot about in the last part. I incorrectly stated that at the end of Godzilla vs. Biollante died after getting a hole blown through her mouth by Godzilla's atomic breath. Yeah, technically that's not true. See, just like at the end of the first fight with Godzilla where Biollante turned into a bunch of spores and regenerated into her plant beast form, the similar thing kind of happened at the end of the movie. Biollante turns into spores, ascends up into the atmosphere, and basically transforms into a giant rose that's just in orbit around the Earth. So yeah, Biollante's not dead. She's technically still alive, and could theoretically regenerate back on Earth into her plant beast form at any time. Just thought I'd point that out there. With that out of the way, let's finally begin our next movie in the Heisei era, Godzilla vs. Mothra. Again, not to be confused with Mothra vs. Godzilla. So after a meteor strikes the Earth, these tiny twin fairies known as the Cosmos warn humans that what is basically an evil clone of Mothra called Batra has been reawakened, created in ancient past by the Earth itself, because apparently the Earth in the Heisei universe is a living being with a mind of its own. So when ancient humans built machines to somehow suck the life out of the Earth fought back with the form of Batra. But Mothra decided to help the humans, and so with the Cosmos' help managed to seal Batra away. Despite this, Batra and Mothra are stated to be evenly matched in terms of power. Batra shows up and starts wreaking some havoc on Japan, before going after Mothra, who's currently still asleep inside of an egg, and Godzilla shows up at the sea, and is basically about to abort Mothra before she finally manages to hatch out of her egg. It's actually very nice for Godzilla to just wait for Mothra to hatch out of her egg. He could have easily shot his atomic breath while she was still in egg form, but nope, he decided to wait. How nice of him. It doesn't go well for Mothra, and when Batra shows up, he's just there to rub further salt on the wound. Batra and Godzilla start fighting each other underwater, and it basically causes an earthquake, splitting open part of the ocean floor. The two disappear as was basically a volcanic eruption that triggers underwater. However, it's later revealed that the two monsters survived this, and that Godzilla escaped by breaking through the Earth's mantle. And people are freaking out on, oh, how can Godzilla survive through magma? It's like 2,000 degrees Celsius. It's like, you do realize he spits out atomic radiation that's like, I don't know, 100,000 times that temperature? Are you really surprised at this point? I mean, for goodness sake, he was inside a volcano for 5 years. This shouldn't surprise anyone at this point. We also get official proof of Godzilla's new height and weight, being 100 meters and 60,000 metric tons. No guidebook or sources needed, it's just there in the movie itself. Isn't that nice? Mothra transforms into her larva form, and soon after, so does Batra. Batra and Mothra get into a fight, and while the two do seem to be evenly matched when it comes to physical attacks, Batra is just the more aggressive fighter, and with his eye lasers eventually lands enough hits to down Mothra, then goes off to fight Godzilla. Batra seems to be doing okay when he's at a distance, just blasting Godzilla with eye lasers, but once Godzilla closes the distance by pretending to be knocked out from a building falling on top of him, he quickly regains the advantage and downs Batra with just 2 blows from his atomic breath. After giving Batra some energy, Mothra and Batra decide to team up to fight Godzilla. We also find out in this fight that this version of Mothra has a very interesting ability that allows her to basically reflect Godzilla's own atomic breath back at him, as well as also redirect Batra's eye beams. Eventually the two manage to knock down Godzilla, but when they go to carry him out into the ocean, Godzilla bites down on Batra's neck and fires his atomic breath point blank into the wound, and after doing this twice, Batra sadly dies, and together with Godzilla they fall into the ocean. Mothra decides to basically put some sort of seal around the spot they fell into the ocean, and I guess this helps keep Godzilla trapped in the ocean. But as we find out in the next movie, it didn't last long now, did it? Apparently a meteor is going to strike the Earth in 1999 and destroy it, so Mothra basically flies off to destroy this meteor before it can hit and destroy the Earth. This basically confirms that Godzilla, Batra, and Mothra are all powerful enough to destroy the Earth, based off this feat at the end, since it's literally stated that Mothra is going to physically alter the trajectory of the asteroid. In other words, Mothra is basically just going to somehow ram into the asteroid and stop it. Since earlier videos I've established that the bare minimum power level to be planet busting is about 11,000, but I normally round up to 12,000, I am introducing a fourth power scaling measure called the Mothball power scaling method. This is basically an extra mile to further lowball the Heisei monsters, in case you think that even the regular lowball, the monsters are getting too high in the power level numbers. Well, here you go. Since the two moth monsters needed to team up to fight Godzilla, I think it's safe to say they're weaker than him. And there's at least 2 different guidebooks confirming that this Godzilla gets stronger with every passing day. Not to mention, we've already established the fact that thanks to the Super X2 and versus Biollante, Godzilla can get twice as strong in about 5 years, even if he's doing nothing inside a volcano. Not to mention the fact that he's in a taller, stronger form now, so one can make the argument he's growing at a faster rate as well. But if only a fifth of the time passes compared to how much time passed between 84 and 89, then Godzilla should be at least 20% stronger. But since he's gotten a power-up since then as well, we're just gonna round it up to 25% and leave it there for each year that passes. Just like the Showa Godzilla. And obviously Batra and Mothra's larva forms should be a tier below their larva forms in terms of power. So yeah, if you're looking on screen, then yes, Batra and Mothra are comparable in power to King Ghidorah, while Godzilla is basically equal to Mecha King Ghidorah. I think this makes sense, given that the two of them together were able to basically accomplish the same feat as Mecha King Ghidorah, so together they should at least be as strong as that, if not stronger, because they're fighting a stronger Godzilla, who should be even stronger than the version that fought Mecha King Ghidorah. The next film we will be looking at is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. So after King Ghidorah bit the dust a second time, the modern-day humans salvaged the wreckage of Mecha King Ghidorah and reverse-engineered the technology to create Mechagodzilla. They also discover an egg which hatches into a tiny Godzillasaurus, which they name Baby Godzilla. Godzilla emerges because Mothra's seal was cracked and has a fight with another monster that just randomly shows up, Rodan. And while Rodan does manage to knock down Godzilla and peck him a bit, it doesn't really seem to really do any damage, and Godzilla eventually knocks him out with a few blasts of his atomic breath. Keep in mind that Rodan took more damage compared to Batra in terms of atomic breath hits. Eventually, Godzilla encounters his mechanical counterpart, and finds that his atomic breath is completely useless against Mechagodzilla due to being made of some sort of diamond-coated armor, basically the same as the Super X2's fire mirror, and case in point, Mechagodzilla is also able to use an ability similar to the Super X2's fire mirror in the form of the plasma grenade, which, when charged with enough energy, is able to fire back the attack at 1,000 to 10,000 times the user's power. However, this one might be leaning more towards the 10,000 multiplier, because with just one shot, it is able to knock down Godzilla onto the ground. And even knocks him down again when he tries to retaliate with another atomic breath shot. In addition, Mechagodzilla also has paralyzing missiles, and begins to electrocute Godzilla with these cables, before Godzilla just pulls another power out of his butt and manages to somehow reverse the flow of energy, causing Mechagodzilla to short circuit. Godzilla then just walks up to Mechagodzilla and just pushes him to the ground. It's kind of sad when you really think about it. And then just walks off. Apparently some people sing some song, and this song somehow powers up both Baby Godzilla and Rodan. And according to this one guidebook, Rodan basically gets a 2 times boost in power, becoming Fire Rodan. How a bunch of singing makes monsters physically stronger, I have no clue. What if Godzilla heard that song? Would he get stronger too? So Fire Rodan begins to fight Mechagodzilla later in the movie, and he has his own version of the atomic breath they somehow picked up from Godzilla, the Uranium Heat Ray. Although thanks to Mechagodzilla's abilities, it's not able to affect him at all. Despite the massive increase in power, Rodan's really only able to sort of peck out Mechagodzilla's eye. He's not even able to knock him down to the ground, although I'd say that's probably due to Mechagodzilla weighing a whopping 150,000 metric tons. Eventually, Rodan gets knocked out, and round 2 soon begins between the Mecha and the Godzilla. They have a beam clash, and it pretty much ends in a tie, basically confirming that the two monsters are evenly matched. Although, Godzilla does get knocked down, but again, Mechagodzilla's probably still standing upright because he weighs a lot more, so it takes a lot more to knock him down compared to Godzilla. But when Godzilla closes his distance, we find out a big glaring weakness about this version of Mechagodzilla. Yeah, his hands and arms are pretty much just there for show. He is completely incapable of hand-to-hand combat, and Godzilla knocks him down once more. This also confirms that Godzilla is still stronger than Fire Rodan, despite Fire Rodan getting a 2 times boost in power. Man, they kinda did Rodan dirty in this movie. After being distracted by the gunship called the Garuda, another weapon designed with the intent of taking out Godzilla, but was deemed inferior due to its limited fighting capabilities, eventually combining with Mechagodzilla to form Super Mechagodzilla. This new form roughly doubles Mechagodzilla's firepower on top of increasing his speed from Mach 1 to Mach 2, at least according to Toho Kingdom. Super Mechagodzilla's overwhelming firepower quickly overwhelms Godzilla and knocks him down to the ground, and using these cable things that Super Mechagodzilla shoots into Godzilla, he basically paralyzes and kills him by destroying a second brain, basically located somewhere around the hip. Things seem grim for the Big G until Rodan, in a final act of sacrifice, transfers the last of his energy to Godzilla, reinvigorating him, healing his destroyed butt brain, and also giving him a 2 times increase. How do I know this? Well, after Godzilla is revived, he outputs enough heat to start melting part of Mechagodzilla's protective armor, and the two have a beam clash, which also ends in a draw. Godzilla showcases this with a new variant of his atomic breath that sort of has like a reddish-orange coloring to it. This new variation of the atomic breath is referred to as the Hyper Uranium Heat Ray, the Super Flame Heat Ray, or just simply the Red Heat Ray. I keep it simple and just call it the Super Spiral Atomic Breath because it's obviously more powerful than a regular spiral atomic breath, but you do you. It has a confirmed temperature of 1.2 million degrees Celsius. Comparing that to the original atomic breath's 500,000 degrees Celsius gives it roughly a 2.4 multiplier to Godzilla's regular atomic breath, or just simply an 18 times multiplier to Godzilla's base. Mechagodzilla can't withstand this kind of power for long though, and is eventually overwhelmed and finished off by Godzilla. So yeah, looking at the comparisons, Rodan starts off pretty weak, even weaker than Mothra and Batra in their larva forms. But if it makes you feel better, Fire Rodan definitely seems more capable compared to Batra and Mothra. The power-ups the 3 monsters get is pretty simple as well. You get a 2 times power-up, you get a 2 times power-up, everyone gets a 2 times power-up. Despite Rodan being weaker than Godzilla, you still managed to get Godzilla a 2 times power increase. How the heck that works, I can't say for certain. The third movie we'll be looking at is Godzilla vs. Spacegodzilla. So to make a long story short, some of Godzilla's DNA somehow ended up in a black hole. Whether it was carried into space by Mothra, or if it was the spores from Biollante, no one's 100% certain. What is a fact though, is that a Godzilla cell somehow ended up in a black hole, and out popped Spacegodzilla. This not only confirms that Spacegodzilla is star level, but potentially whatever version of Godzilla whose DNA also went into a black hole as well. Potentially confirming that the Heisei Godzilla was already star level as far back as Godzilla vs. Biollante. Boom! Star level confirmed. It gets even crazier in the Godzilla vs. Spacegodzilla manga, where there's a panel basically stating that Space Godzilla illuminated the whole universe. The Versus Wiki had a page basically measuring how much energy would be needed to illuminate the universe, and it basically came out to solar system level, which, yeah, if we're looking at Godzilla's current power levels as of this movie, a 25% increase from the last movie, by the way, yeah, that's consistent with both the mid-ball and high-ball estimates. The humans have also now built another machine to take down Godzilla called Mothra, who, according to guides, is 6 times the power of Super Mechagodzilla. That might sound a bit ridiculous that this mole-looking thing is more powerful than Super Mechagodzilla, but trust me, Mothra is not to be underestimated. I forgot to mention this before, but the Heisei Godzilla is also resistant to mind control and telepathic abilities. This first happened in Godzilla vs. Biollante, where this one lady tried to take over Godzilla, but it didn't work out for her. They tried this again in Spacegodzilla, and it does work for a while, but Godzilla does eventually overpower the psychic control as well. We also see that the baby Godzilla has grown up quite a bit since last time, now being a whopping 30 meters tall, and definitely not normal because baby Godzilla is way taller than the Godzillasaurus we saw before in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Now known as Little Godzilla, Little Godzilla got this tall and strong just by existing near Godzilla. Yeah, just the radiation Godzilla gave off mutated baby Godzilla into Little Godzilla. How would you like to get a massive power increase just by existing near someone else? Unreal. So Spacegodzilla and Mothra come to blows in space, but Spacegodzilla in his flight form, which is 10 times the weight of his base combat form, is able to completely power through Mothra's attacks and make short work of him in space before heading to Earth. We find out from the Cosmo Fairies that Spacegodzilla's intention is to kill Godzilla, then destroy the Earth. Keep this in mind because this will completely explain Spacegodzilla's motivations and actions throughout the rest of the movie. Spacegodzilla soon arrives on Earth into his combat form, and soon encounters Little Godzilla, and decides to provoke him into calling Godzilla for help by firing his attack which cannot be named at him. Now, if you look very closely, you'll notice that Spacegodzilla never actually directly hits Little Godzilla. His attack sort of like impacts on the ground in front of him or to the sides of him, but never actually hits him directly. He's just trying to scare Little Godzilla into calling out his dad. Godzilla shows up, and while he does manage to land a single atomic breath on Spacegodzilla, he doesn't let him get another chance as he throws up a protective barrier to basically reflect his own atomic breath back at him. Spacegodzilla transforms into his flight form and blasts Godzilla some more, before trapping Little Godzilla in a crystal prison before flying off. Spacegodzilla then proceeds to erupt a bunch of crystal towers around a single city, basically turning it into his crystal fortress. Now this is actually a rather smart play on Spacegodzilla's part. He wants to kill Godzilla, it's his whole motivation in this entire movie. But even his flight form isn't enough. One does not simply kill Godzilla. It's not enough to be stronger than Godzilla. You have to have a massive power increase over him if you want to actually kill him. Godzilla can tank energy attacks far higher than his own power level. Mothra soon shows up for round 2, and actually manages to do a little better this time, even managing to close the gap and draw some blood from Spacegodzilla with his nose drill attack, but is soon forced to retreat when Spacegodzilla's attacks prove too much for him. Godzilla soon arrives for the rematch, but it doesn't go that much better either, with Spacegodzilla pulling out a whole bunch of attacks, throwing Godzilla with his telekinesis, launching a bunch of crystal stuff through the air at him, and even managing to overpower him in hand-to-hand combat when he somehow filters energy into his punches. Godzilla destroys one of the nearby crystal towers, and eventually figures out that there's this big building behind Spacegodzilla that's giving him a lot more power, so he begins to target that. With Mothra's help, he's able to distract Spacegodzilla long enough for Godzilla to actually destroy this giant building, feeding Spacegodzilla additional power. If you look closely, you'll notice that the building actually shoots Spacegodzilla in the back with some blue lightning right before he attacks. I assume all the extra crystal towers around him in the city are also giving him power, but I don't know if it's constant at all times, or just when he's doing attacks or when he calls on it specifically. After the giant building thing is brought down, Godzilla engages Spacegodzilla in close combat, and doesn't immediately get knocked down from it. Mothra blasts Spacegodzilla in the back with his full firepower, and while it doesn't really seem to do anything to Spacegodzilla, it knocks Godzilla out cold for a whole minute, at least. So, yeah, Mothra being 6 times stronger than Super Mechagodzilla, I could believe because he actually managed to knock Godzilla unconscious for at least a full minute. Watch the movie if you don't believe me. Godzilla is knocked unconscious. It takes a while to get back up from this. And Spacegodzilla took the brunt of the hit too. Eventually, Mothra manages to finally destroy the 2 giant crystals on Spacegodzilla's shoulders, weakening him significantly. And apparently it's in this moment that the released cosmic energy powers up Godzilla as well, because later on we see Godzilla start to overpower Spacegodzilla, as well as including his regular atomic breath as well. Even in this weakened state, Spacegodzilla is still able to overpower Mothra, as evidenced when he blasts off one of Mothra's arms, and then throwing him after impaling him with his tail, taking him out of the fight. Godzilla then unleashes a familiar attack, which looks very reminiscent of the Uranium heat ray, only this time it's apparently only 900,000 degrees Celsius instead of 1.2 million degrees Celsius. This attack is officially called the Burn Spiral Heat Ray or Nuclear Fusion Heat Ray. And with a few blasts of it, he's able to finally finish off Spacegodzilla for good. The fact that Godzilla was able to do what Mothra couldn't, despite the fact that Mothra is 6 times the power of Super Mechagodzilla, means that Godzilla still has to be significantly stronger than that, meaning that yes, Godzilla had to get bare minimum 7 times stronger in just this one movie. And that is why I believe the earlier statement that when Godzilla grew to 100 meters in versus King Ghidorah, he got 200 times stronger. Because even getting 7 times stronger, he's still at that same 100-meter height. So there you go, further evidence supporting the 200 times power increase. So one more thing I forgot to add. I found these scans from the Quora website, so I don't know where they came from, but apparently Spacegodzilla, while he was being powered by that tower, might have actually been universe level in terms of power. Don't know where this source came from, but thought I'd just include it. Bye! At long last, we arrive at the final Heisei movie, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. Godzilla surfaces in Hong Kong, and you'll notice immediately something's different about him. His body's all glowy, and his standard atomic breath has now been replaced with the more powerful reddish-orange atomic breath we've seen before in the previous 2 movies. Apparently, Godzilla's power level grew to the point where it triggered some sort of reaction in his heart, outputting a bunch of radiation which just happened to ignite uranium deposits underneath the island he and little Godzilla were living on, causing the whole island to explode and Godzilla to absorb even more energy, transforming him into burning Godzilla. His original atomic breath now replaced with the burning heat ray. While not directly stated how hot it is, I'm going to assume it's probably about the same level of power as his original version of the attack, given the massive jump in power compared to when he got it in the Spacegodzilla movie towards the end. However, this new form of Godzilla is unstable, and within a matter of days or heck even hours, Godzilla's heart will explode and he will basically destroy the whole planet. Stated to literally be like the China syndrome, but worse, with Godzilla's heat melting through to the Earth's core and would basically vaporize the whole planet. Other people have basically said that it would be like all the nuclear bombs in the world going off at once, which is only about island level, which obviously the explosion would be a lot worse than that. I've also found one scan of a subtitled version of the movie where they state it would basically be like the biggest explosion ever measured in the history of time, but I never saw this subtitled in the version of the movie I watched, so it's not really consistent. Godzilla could be well beyond solar system level, or he might even be universe level. There's a script of the Godzilla vs. Destroroyah movie online, but I obviously can't find the whole thing, and I've only been able to come across a handful of pages. Whether any of these state that Godzilla's meltdown explosion would destroy the whole universe, I can't tell for certain. But I'm going to post what pictures of the script I have been able to find online, and if there's anyone who knows how to read Japanese, you can take a crack at it yourself. Even more if you actually have the script. Spread the word, people. The humans unleash the Super X-3 at some point later to stop Godzilla from reaching a nuclear power plant. This Super X-3 features a new armor that makes it resistant to high temperature attacks from Godzilla, allowing it to actually tank multiple hits from his enhanced atomic breath attacks. It also finally reuses the cadmium missiles idea from the Super X-1, as well as also using a cryo laser and freeze missiles. This is actually enough to take down Godzilla and freeze him for about half a day. So yeah, the Super X that actually beat Godzilla. Since the Super X series have normally featured durability far higher than its actual attack power, I'm not going to say that its power level reflects that of how tanky it is against Godzilla's atomic breath, merely that it's only a little bit stronger, because it'd obviously be way too high above Godzilla and the eventual monster that we're about to talk about. We find out what happened to little Godzilla. He also got mutated by the island explosion and became Godzilla Jr., now growing from 30 meters to a whopping 40 meters and looking a lot more like his foster father, too. If you remember our talk about power reflecting the growth and height of monsters, then little Godzilla transitioning to Godzilla Jr. from 30 meters to 40 meters means that he got 100 times increase in power, at the very, very least. Which means that same growth in power should also apply to Heisei Godzilla, because he would have taken the same amount of energy as Godzilla Jr. did, which means that if Godzilla Jr. got 100 times stronger, that's right, that means Heisei Godzilla got 100 times stronger as well. Plus the experience boost he got from the last movie. This is mainly because I think a 2.4 multiplier just based off his regular atomic breath being permanently replaced with the stronger variant, I feel is too small of an increase given the drastic change in Godzilla's body. Around this same time, a bunch of pre-Cambrian era crustaceans have been wreaking havoc on the humans. These little microscopic organisms were apparently mutated by the original Oxygen Destroyer, the weapon that killed the original Godzilla back in 1954. These crab abominations only show weakness against high temperature and low temperature attacks like flamethrowers and rocket launchers and cryo weapons. Now dubbed Destoroyah, the little creatures soon form into a bigger crab version and go on a rampage. A plan is soon formed to get all the monsters to fight each other, and Destroroyah, now in a flying form, soon comes to blows with Godzilla Jr. When he's shot at with Jr.'s atomic breath, which he now has, he transforms back into his aggregate form and is able to overpower Godzilla Jr., directly biting down on his chest, exposing his heart, before breathing his Oxygen Destroyer beam right on top of it. This does obviously hurt Godzilla Jr., but he is able to blast Destoroyah away with his atomic breath, setting him crashing into a building. I'd say Destoroyah's flying and aggregate forms are pretty much the same in terms of power. He just kind of swaps between the two for whatever purpose he needs them for, but I don't see any reason to believe one form's stronger than the other. The two Godzillas soon reunite, but it's a sad reunion cut short when Destoroyah emerges now in his quote-unquote perfect final form. He easily overpowers Godzilla and soon kills Godzilla Jr. as well. At this point, Godzilla is about to go critical before his meltdown occurs, and is obviously not happy that his son was killed by Destoroyah, and begins attacking Destroroyah. It's at this point that Godzilla unveils his strongest atomic breath in the entire franchise, the Infinite Heat Ray, an atomic breath said to increase in power every time he fires it. We're going to be modest here and say that it just simply gets a 25% power increase every time he fires it. The first attack is tanked by Destoroyah, but the second onwards causes him to bleed. However, Destroroyah is still able to hold his own against Godzilla for a time, even basically slicing through him with his lightsaber horn. But if you notice, while there is blood exploding out of Godzilla's body when this happens, it doesn't seem to be any other injury besides that. It's like Godzilla's healing so fast, he's regenerating as the attack is happening. When Godzilla begins to finally overwhelm Destoroyah in hand-to-hand combat, he switches tactics and goes back into a bunch of his smaller aggregate forms. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that it really looks like only 3 of them are actually attacking him, while the others are just kind of sticking close by. The 3 eventually are able to cause him to topple down to the ground. I assume that he thought it was easier to overwhelm Godzilla through numbers, rather than just relying on a single stronger form. This also confirms that the aggregate form Destoroyah, at least in numbers of 3 or more, are sufficient enough to overpower Godzilla at this state, meaning that at least 3 aggregate form Destroyers are probably about at least as strong as one perfect form Destoroyah. However, upon unleashing his nuclear pulse, Destoroyah decides it's better to stick with his stronger single body. Godzilla fires his infinite heat ray a total of 5 times in this fight, which, if each one starting from an 18 times multiplier increases by 25% each time, then we're looking at a total increase of at least 55 times Godzilla's base attacks. Destoroyah tries to retreat, but the human military and the Super X swoop in, and with the combined damage from Godzilla already, Destoroyah crumbles to the ground and explodes, killing him for good. I should mention this real quick, but according to this one guide, it's implied that Destoroyah might have been able to evolve even further past his quote-unquote perfect form if given the chance to retreat. Godzilla finally succumbs to his meltdown explosion, and we watch as he quite gruesomely melts away into nothing. The humans are able to soften the explosion impact so everyone doesn't die by using their cryoweapons, but it still heavily irradiated Japan to a ghost town state. That is, until it's discovered that the radiation levels are going down, and we see this emerging from the smoke. That's right, it's Godzilla Jr., having fully absorbed all the radiation from Godzilla's meltdown explosion, turning him into a new adult form Godzilla. This should mean that he at least got 600 times stronger at the bare minimum, if not just simply being equal in power to Godzilla's hypothetical meltdown explosion, which should be in a tier all on its own compared to the power of his infinite heat ray, so I'd say at least twice as strong as his strongest infinite heat ray attack, which means it should at the very least be 110 times stronger than Godzilla's base form right before his meltdown, that is. I think we're all also in agreement that Destoroyah should be vastly stronger than the Super X3, even though the monsters never directly attack it during the final battle, which is why I didn't have the Super X3 being, say, 36 times burning Godzilla's power level, based off the fact that it tanked multiple hits from his enhanced atomic breath. You might have noticed that I'm just kind of glossing over Godzilla Jr.'s power. I've got quite a bit to say about Jr., which is why he's getting his own video. So how strong is the Heisei era Godzilla? Well, I think just going off the power level numbers, as well as the various statements confirming that he is at least planet level as of Godzilla vs. Mothra, to potentially even being star level at the very least, as early as possibly Godzilla vs. Biollante, based off the Godzilla cell that created Spacegodzilla surviving exposure in a black hole, and black holes can only be created by stars that are bare minimum twice the size of the sun, which is average in terms of star size, as well as the various statements confirming that Heisei Godzilla is stronger than the Showa Godzilla, which is already at least star to potentially large star level, not to mention both our mid-ball power scaling numbers as well as the Godzilla vs. Spacegodzilla manga basically confirming that he is likely also solar system level, not to mention the many power-ups this one got throughout the few movies he had. I think it's safe to say bare minimum that Heisei Godzilla is at least solar system level. possibly multi-solar system level, potentially even universe level if you go by the highball numbers, as well as the one subtitle that hinted at him being universe level in terms of his meltdown destruction. And since Destroroyah has been confirmed to be the strongest opponent Godzilla's ever fought, that would scale him above Spacegodzilla with his Crystal Fortress amp, which, going by this one statement, might have potentially been universe level. But that's not enough evidence for me to be satisfied with that, so I'll just simply say theoretic universal level if we highball it, that is. In the end, it wasn't a virus or weapon or monster that killed Godzilla. It was his own power. He's just simply too strong. But not strong enough to reach number 1 on our total Godzilla rankings list. Even highballed, the Heisei Godzilla only reaches universe level with his death, while the Marvel Comics Godzilla is already in a tier above his own in terms of universal scaling. I do, however, have no doubt that if the Heisei Godzilla had continued on in more movies, he would have definitely reached a higher tier of power by now. Being capable of taking his own atomic breath attack back at him at least 1,000 to potentially 10,000 times the power, he's definitely one of the most durable Godzillas I've ever seen in the entire history of the franchise. Not to mention having one of the most powerful atomic breath attacks as well. That infinite heat ray is ridiculous. But I think this video's gone on far longer than enough. Join us next time for a surprise Godzilla that not even the Versus Wiki has ever covered, as we continue our Godzilla power scaling series. Hope you all enjoyed. Take care.